Hey guys, Dusty here. Today I want to talk a little bit about something that a lot of runners overlook, and that is your arm carry or arm swing. So hopefully for many of us, our arm swing is something that is smooth, relaxed, and something that we don't have to think about. But there are a few guidelines and then some tips and tricks that I'll share with you in this video. And just remember, there isn't one correct way to have a proper arm carry. It's going to vary from runner to runner slightly, and even at the professional or elite level, even those runners will have variations in their arm swing. So with that being said, let's go over some basics. Okay, so first of all, for every runner with the exception of sprinters, generally speaking, you want to keep your hands close to your body. So sprinting is really the only type of running where you're going to be moving your arms back and forward. Endurance runners should generally keep their hands tighter or closer to their body. And one thing I've heard that actually rings true, at least for myself, is you want to keep the path of your hand from nip to hip. So generally speaking, especially when I run, I like to, my hand goes about to my chest height and then down to my hip height. My hands never going that far away from my body. They're probably always within 6 inches of my body. And like I mentioned earlier, there's obviously some variations of this. Even at the elite level, some elite runners will raise their hands even higher than their chest and go almost up to their clavicle or their collarbone. Likewise, some other runners won't even get as high as the chest. They're kind of more lower arm runners. That seems to work for some people. I don't think it looks as efficient as kind of nip to hip like I talked about. But hey, it works for a lot of runners much faster than me, so keep on doing it if it works for you. Now, as far as elbow flexion goes, stereotypically is keeping your arm bent at 90 degrees. I would say there's kind of a range of about 80 to 100 degrees. A lot of runners will run with their arms closed a lot more than 90 degrees. And likewise, on the back part of your arm swing, generally speaking, usually your arm will open up to a bit less than 90 degrees. Now, one important rule or guideline that you'll want to follow is you don't want your arm swing to cross the center line of your body. So you can go up to the center line, but you don't want to be crossing over that center line. That's going to lead to too much rotation, which can cause a number of things, including doing wonky things to your leg or foot strike, and ultimately possibly causing some injuries. So if you're someone that over rotates with your upper body and your hands are crossing the center line, there is a drill that you can do, and this is called the stable arm drill. And what you do for this drill is very simple. You're just going to run with your hands out in front of you. You can start here, do a few rounds, and then even put your hands together. And you'll want to do a few rounds of, let's say, 10 seconds running with your hands out in front of you, and you want to make sure that there isn't too much swaying from side to side. You want to be pretty stable. So if you're someone that tends to over rotate and cross your center line, do a few rounds of the stable arm drill, and hopefully that can start to reinforce how your upper body should feel and making sure that your arms aren't crossing that center line. Another thing about those runners that cross the center line, oftentimes their elbows might stick out too far. So one of the things you can also focus on is maybe moving your elbows in a bit more. All right, now another thing about proper arm swing is what do we do with our hands? So when you're running, you want your palms to be parallel. So make sure your palms aren't facing the ground or the sky. You want them facing each other. And generally speaking, you want to be relaxed, but not too relaxed. So a good analogy that I've heard of, and I'm sure many of you have heard of, is run like you're holding chips, potato chips in your hand. So you want to have a firm enough grip that they wouldn't fall out, but you don't want to be too firm that you're actually going to break them. Another one I've heard of is holding eggs in your hand. You can pretend you're running with eggs in your hand, and you don't want to be too loose because then you're just getting all sloppy, and that could lead to some things like over rotating. And you definitely don't want to be too tight with your hands, because that's going to cause a lot of stress and tension, and that's going to work its way up your body. You might start to raise your shoulders a little bit, and it's just going to throw your whole run form off. Another tip, kind of about tension or stress is if your shoulders start to rise. I know when my wife runs, she has this problem a lot of the times. Her shoulders will start to creep up. And one thing I could recommend for that is when you're running, if you sense your shoulders starting to rise up, just shake your arms out. And it's something I'll do on race day all the time, especially in sometimes the early stages of a race when I'm just trying to reinforce in my head, be relaxed, be smooth. You often see me running and I'll shake my arms out, or if I put in a big surge later on in the race or crest a hill and I was working really hard up the hill, when that effort is over, I always remind myself to run smooth and relaxed, and I always shake my arms out. Another interesting thing about a runner's arm carry is oftentimes it's directly correlated to your cadence. You're running the cadence of your feet as well. So if you're someone that has a really low cadence, a little tip for you is pick up the cadence of your arm swing. Increasing cadence is hard for a lot of athletes and something that feels pretty unnatural, but with some practice and increasing your arm swing, oftentimes the feet will follow and you'll start to be able to run at a faster cadence. Now, oftentimes those runners that have really low run cadences, they're often overstriders. And when I look at runners who are obvious overstriders, so their feet, their heel striking and their foot is landing way out in front of their center of gravity, oftentimes their arm carry, they're overstriding with that as well. So a lot of the times their hands will be going way out in front of them, and they usually have a locked elbow and they're almost pumping their arms more like a sprinter. Now, I'm sure many of you know we want to avoid overstriding as runners. And for those of you who are overstriders and taking big, huge, long steps, and your arm swing is big and long as well, for you, I would recommend making everything tighter to your body. So try to avoid having your hands way outside of your body. Move them in tighter. Like I said, try to keep your hands about within 6 inches of your body, and try to follow the nip to hip rule and see what happens. And also, I'm sure this will happen anyways if you're making your arm carry smaller, but if you're an overstrider, try taking smaller steps as well. Alright, so to review proper arm carry or proper arm swing, first up, you want to keep everything, generally speaking, nice and tight to your body. A rule you could follow, like I've talked about a few times, is nip to hip. So that's kind of the path that your hand will follow. The degree that your elbow is bent should be anywhere from about 80 to 100. You don't want to go much more or much less than that. Much more, you're going to start to be activating your biceps, and that's not something you want or need while you're running. And then you definitely want to make sure that you're not over rotating or crossing that center line with your arm carry. And if you are, try the stable arm drill. Then we move on to the hands. You want to avoid having any sort of tension in your hands. You want to be relaxed, but not too relaxed. So remember, palms facing parallel to each other. Hold those potato chips, not so lightly they're going to fall out, and not too hard that you're going to crush them. And then try to stay relaxed in the shoulders. You don't want them creeping up and running with your hands up here. If you tend to do that, like my wife, just shake out your arms. And for those of you that are overstriding, try to just focus your next run on making your arm carry nice and tight. So I hope some of you found those tips helpful. A lot of runners don't think about arm carry. It's usually just something that comes natural to many of us, but it can certainly help those of us that are overstriding, or for those of us that maybe need to pick our cadence up. You'd be really surprised at what you do with your arms, how much that affects the rest of your running. If you've never tried it before, try running with your hands down at your side. It feels very, very awkward, and you're not going to be very efficient. So with that being said, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video.